So after the primer was dry, I went back into the kitchen to do a scratch test. And before I did that, I realised that there was a little bit of bleeding coming through. So you can see it here on the top moulding part. It's like that, kind of like a yellowy seeping through the wood, and more predominantly in where the microwave was. So this is just tannins and resins from the wood, and they're trying to escape. But no matter how many times you paint this, it's always going to seep through. So you have to go in with a really good stain blocker to stop this from happening. So I went in with Crown's P by 4 all-purpose primer, but it's really good for blocking stains. And you really have to put this on before you paint, because it'll just always come through. It'll always seep through eventually. You'll never get away with it. I've tried. So you have to make sure that you put this little stain block in before you put your finish coat on. So I just paint over any of those areas. So I'll paint the whole moulding on the top, because I know that is prone to bleeding. So I want to prevent that, even if maybe there's an area that I haven't really seen yet. But you need to make sure you're just blocking that whole area. And I'm going to block this panel. It only seemed to come up on this panel, so I need to paint in this panel with the stain block to prevent that from happening. Also, after the priming stage, little areas like this really show up. So any gaps that need to be filled, or anything that needs a little bit of repair work. So I'm just going to go in with some caulk, and I'm going to get all those joints that are all on the end of the kitchen. So you just fill them in. So after you fill them in, you can go in with a wet cloth just to remove it. I'm going to go in here with my finger. If you have sensitive skin, just make sure that you're wearing gloves. So I'm just going to remove any of the extra caulk. And I'm going to smooth it out. If you go in here with like a wet sponge or a wet cloth to smoothen out that surface, and then you need to leave it dry for 24 hours before you apply any paint onto it. Here again, you can see at the corner joints as well, you can see that little gap, and to fill these in I think makes a huge difference, and it doesn't take that long, but you do need the caulk to dry for 24 hours before you apply paint on top of it. If you're painting a kitchen cabinet door that has a little bit of glass behind it, I don't usually tend to use masking tape and tape it all off and cover the area with like newspaper print. I'm going to show you a little trick that I do. So I'm just going to paint all around the grooves first, just like I've done before, and go in with the roller on the flatter areas. And then once it comes to that small little detail that's very close to the glass, I just go in there with a small little artist paintbrush. Just take my time and I paint all those the little grooves, and then I go in and paint along the glass. And then if there's any paint that gets onto the glass, I can remove that with a scraper afterwards, instead of taking all the time to get painter's tape, tape it out, cover it, and then you're still going to have to go in afterwards with a glass scraper to remove the little bits of paint that will get on the glass, even if it's even if you have it taped off properly. So once the primer's dry, you do the exact same process then again with your paint, with your satin paint. So the same process, paint the edges and the top part, and then go in with the small little brush to get the detailed areas, and then we can go in with the glass scraper. So to change the handles, and this goes for any kind of piece of furniture that you have, just make sure that you push in the wood filler into the pre-oiled hole, and then we're going to go in with a filling knife. And the filling knife is a real like flexible knife, so you can scrape off the extra filler, and then you can leave it dry and sand it back. So when you sand it back, make sure you're using medium grit sanding paper, and also you need to remove all the dust with your tack cloth before you apply paint. So now it's time for painting. So I'm going in with the Crown Fast Flow Quick Dry Satin. It's really, really nice to use. And a lot of people don't know that it's for interior and for exterior use, and it's for wood and metal. So there's loads of different projects that you can do. Always make sure as well that you're mixing every tin of paint that you open really well with a paint stick. You might have noticed as well that the bottom cabinets, the prime and undercoat is a dark grey. So this is to help you on your coats of paint when you're painting. So if I went in with a white primer here and I was going in with this teal that's really, really deep, I probably need more coats of paint. So usually when you're painting, you need two coats, and you might need a little top up coat as well, so just in certain areas. But that really depends on the colour that you've picked. So some of the high pigments colour are harder for coverage, like yellow and red. So it's just the exact same process as before. I'm painting all the detailed areas and around the edges with the sash brush, and then I'm doing the larger areas with the roller. After I have the first coat done, I leave it fully dry for a few hours, and then I come back in and I will sand off any of the imperfections that might be in the first coat, and you can use like a fine sandpaper for this. So just like buffing in between coats can make the final coat really smooth. So it's always the same process when I'm coming into paint. I'm doing awkward areas first with the sash brush, and then I'm going in with the larger areas with the roller. So I tend to take that method on every single piece that I paint. So white paint can be pretty hard for coverage, but if you use a really good quality paint, as you can see here, it covers it really, really well. So I'll only need two coats with this white paint. So you can use your hands as well to feel for any imperfections when you're buff sanding, and just always make sure that when you buff in between coats that you're removing the dust as well. And then your final coat. So the exact same process with the little sash brush in on the details, and then the larger areas with the roller. So with the roller as well, there shouldn't be any orange peel or anything that like that left behind when you're using a roller, and it really depends on your roller. So a really good quality microfiber roller will really like save you time and effort when you're painting. So don't put too much pressure on your roller when you're painting, nice and light, and then if you're left with any kind of paint lines in between where you've rolled, just lightly roll those off. To paint really awkward areas like this little wine rack, I have a little trick. So it's really hard to get in to the little nooks and crannies with a brush and with a roller. So I got my little sash brush that worked out really well for the little edges, but then I went in with a roller handle, and I used a roller handle that's for painting behind radiators. So it's like extra long, which is great to get into those small little longer areas. So just loaded up my paintbrush and I went in and painted it with the roller handle. It does make life a lot easier. So to measure the correct spot for new handles, I have a little trick I'm going to show you on how to do this like the easy way. So just going to get the center point of the drawer, and I'm going to get a little pencil and mark that in. And then once I have the center point, I can measure everything from this point so that everything's even. I usually do this as well once I have the first coat on, and then I can sand it back and put on the second coat, and then I can paint any bits that need to be painted. So I flip over the handle. So I'm going to have two screw holes to drill, and to get these in the exact points that I need them to be, I'm just going to put a little bit of painter's tape behind the handle, and then I'm going to get a pencil and I'm going to punch the two holes where the new screw holes need to be on the masking tape, and then I can pull off the masking tape. I'm going to half this tape so that the holes line up, and then that fold line I'm going to match up with the line that I have sketched out onto the drawer front. And then I'm going to pop down the tape, and I'm going to make sure that the handle is in the right position. So I'm just going to double check it to make sure that that is the position that the handle is going to be in before I drill it. So usually when you're drilling the holes, always make sure that you use the same thickness drill that is the size of the thickness of the screw as well, so the two of those match up. So you're not drilling a tiny hole and then the screw won't go in, or vice versa. And we're just screwing into where the mark is on that tape as well, so that that makes sure that it's going to be totally level and that it's going to line up. So after I have drilled the second hole, I'm going to remove the dust and then I'm going to buff it before I put on the final coat of paint. So after you have the final coat on, you can pop back on your doors. So just to remind you that this is what the kitchen looked like before, and the power of paint. It really brightened it up. We added some little pink details, and now I'm going to show you some befores and afters that you can feast your eyes on.